All right, so what we're looking at now is a video called Are Left Arguments on Trans Out of Date? It's from a year ago. Only got 401 views. The Popular Show has 688 subscribers, so a small thing. Which, hey, we cover all sorts. We cover smaller channels, we cover bigger channels. I'll watch anything, because I'm just interested in perspectives, and it sounded interesting to me. So let's see.
It's all part of the plan.
Frontlines ends in 2021, but
Okay, right off the bat, if the audio isn't great, I have it on 4. I don't think I can get it any higher than this. So let's just see how we go. Appears to be a podcast of some kind. I'll subscribe to him. I subscribe to everyone I watch. But yeah, let's have a look. Apologies for the audio.
already feel like quite a lot has happened in the discourse around trans in some ways that you actually predict in some remarkable.
Okay, what I would suggest, I think you might be using this microphone. I don't know if this channel even still posts or exists or whatever. But yeah, get a microphone, preferably get some kind of compressor, because if the volume's like really, really wide, it's just difficult. But hey, that's me squinnying because I'm a streamer and I have to now try and handle it. It's fine. Let's keep going.
Early pieces. I mean, I had planned to say something about how the kind of rhetoric of the anti-trans fraction has changed recently, and in looking back through the book, I discovered you sort of predicted this in 2013 that the emphasis would come off of trans women and worrying about toilets and worrying about sexist stereotypes being reinforced. I think that the TERFs had to move on from that. I just have not met a cis woman who is genuinely alarmed about toilets unless it's somebody who has been really radicalized on online forums. And the gender critical thing, I do think that gender abolition was never going to be a particularly winning prospect, because most people at least some of the time like having a gender, and also most people don't experience gender as this compulsory imposition, but rather they're perfectly comfortable with the idea that you transgress it sometimes. So that the whole kind of legacy sort of second wave radical feminist framing on gender was never going to be a sort of source for a sort of mass mobilization. That the change that really has happened, and as I say, you did predict it, is a movement onto attention on trans men, or especially trans boys, which quite recently professional TERFs almost to an almost comic extent tended to ignore. And actually quite a lot of the time you suspected that
there's something really weird about hearing like a middle-aged man talking about TERFs. I don't know what it is. It feels like that kind of word only really feels like normal coming out of like a teenager, early 20s, something queer person's mouth. But hey, maybe that's what he is and I'm misgendering and misaging him, in which case I apologize.
That a lot of TERFs forgot they existed quite often, and actually seemed confused about whether trans men meant trans women or trans men, if you see what I mean. But now that really is the center of attention, and the sort of statistics on a rapid rise in transition from assigned female at birth to male has received a lot of attention.
Well, yeah, what's the explanation for it? Like, does it make sense that naturally, because there's a bit more visibility around trans issues, that now suddenly loads of women are going to start doing it, as opposed to more being men turning into women than the other way around, as it were? But no one ever seems to like any of the potential causes, such as things like social contagion, which, I don't know, to me, I think it's unavoidable, but like you have to accept that there's a bit of that, at least in some people. But hey,
I want to get your view and your sort of retort on that, but I also, I don't know, want to make the slightly more critical point that I think that if the anti-trans, or the to use your Alan Partridge joke, trans skeptic case has changed, I think that the pro-trans left counter-arguments have not yet changed with them. I mean,
that's actually true. Like, most people I know are saying the same shit, you know? Like, I've been hearing the same arguments for years and years and years, and the gender critical stuff has like developed because the world changes. That's just what happens. And it just feels like we've done the same things. Like, the main argument I see for trans women in women's sports is trans women are women, you know? Because we don't want to think about this stuff, and we try and write it off as like, oh, you're focusing on that because that's just one of the issues you're strong on, but actually you want to get rid of all trans people. And that's like, well, you completely have not engaged with that argument then. But that's what we do more. We're more interested in sidestepping arguments than actually engaging with any of them, because the problem is we don't really have any arguments. So when we engage with someone who, say, is not a big fan of trans women in sports because of the potential advantage and things like that, and we might cite the lack of strong evidence that at a certain point through HRT the advantage is reduced, and we don't really have any arguments against that except to move the goalpost to something else and call people transphobic, and it's not working. This is exactly why, you know, the TERF side, gender criticals, whatever we're calling it, that's why they're getting a lot of ground back. And that's what happens when you force the culture too fast in one direction. It ends up swinging back because people rebel. And plenty of trans people out there didn't want half this shit. Like, I'm not pro trans women in women's sports for reasons I just mentioned. I'm not pro trans in kids. I think that that's a huge decision for a child to make that could infertilize them by the time they're in their early 20s if they follow the path, which, you know, I couldn't have made that decision when I was a kid, you know? And there's other things. But like, we've insisted on pushing that shit anyway without even having a consensus on it ourselves, let alone anyone else. So we're pushing the culture way too fast and it's swinging back. And, you know, plenty of us could have said that this was going to be coming like a long time ago, but people weren't listening because I don't know, there's this kind of hive mind to trans, and if you're not part of it, then you're out of luck. Like, I hope you don't want to be friends with any trans people, because it's probably not going to happen unless you come across one that happens to be normal like you. So, hey.
The CAS review interim report into gender reassignment services.
Oh, that was out by then. So this is 2022, November 24th. I do remember bits of the CAS report, the interim CAS review or whatever it was, but we'll see what they're saying.
In the UK, which has resulted in the hitherto only youth gender treatment clinic, the Tavistock Clinic, being closed down, and supposedly its services kind of diversified around the country. This is a huge change, and frankly, quite rightly, the sort of transphobe party regard this as a victory for their side. But I've just seen very little response to it or announcement of it on the kind of, you know, the Corbyn left platforms.
Well, I don't know about the interim one, but our response to the CAS report, the CAS review itself, was discredit the authors, make as many conspiracy theories up as we can, and make sure that fucking hacks like Aaron in the Morning, Aaron Reed, Alejandro Caraballo, people like that are the ones pushing it. Sometimes before the fucking, what's the word? It's not a curfew, it's before the curtain has been lifted that they can report on it. Whatever the term for it is, I can't remember. That was our thing, because we're just another politicized group that makes up conspiracy theories that can't be proved or unproved these days. That's what being trans is about. Not, you know, dysphoria or being yourself, which I've heard so many times since doing this that I actually want to puke when I hear
it. And so on. I mean, there's nothing in New Socialist, there's nothing in Tribune as far as I could see. So I guess that concerns me, and it also makes me feel like there's just a vacuum for what is the left-wing trans supportive sympathetic answer to why there's been a rapid increase in trans boys, and whether there is what is the trans-friendly left interpretation of the closure of.
So I don't like all his wordings. He's used like the transphobe, as in like the transphobe group or whatever. But it's a good question.
The Tavistock.
Yeah, right. Well, that's a really big and interesting question. I don't really have a particularly good answer, I'm afraid.
I have plenty of answers, but this kind of person might not like them. I don't actually know what this person's views are, but yeah, let's see.
Partly because, through exhaustion and through sort of, just doing a lot of other things, I'm teaching a lot now and doing a lot of other work away from writing, and particularly away from like this more activist form of writing. I haven't been spending so much time with this because I'm just exhausted.
It can't always be you, Juliet.
No, exactly. I'm completely exhausted.
You didn't pick a great guest then, if that's the case. Fuck me.
Exhausted with it, and have had to move away from it to some extent. And part of the problem for the trans community and the trans left here and the left more generally, I mean, firstly, I think you present a more coherent and more influential picture of the sort of post-Corbyn left than I personally feel. I mean, my feeling is like we've just been completely smashed. We've been marginalised again, much more quickly and much more easily than I thought would happen, which has been, very, very demoralising. And the sort of
it's because the UK left sucks, by the way. They're awful, useless, no point in them. We complain about how Labour and the Tories seem to just be the same. Well, we don't bring any alternative, and we don't care about people joining the cause because we don't want people to understand, it seems. No one wants to simplify all this like Marxist shit, so it makes sense to random guys down the pub. So what the fuck are they going to do with that,
The left that's really re-emerged, to an extent the left has re-emerged, is obviously, a much more like trade union-led, much more sort of class-based, if not like class-first, concern on labour conditions. And that's really important, that's good, and I 100% support it. And I found that movement to be like very welcoming to me as like a trans person. I don't think that's been an issue. So in some ways I think that's a positive development. But yeah, these issues around identity, in the way that kind of politics sometimes does, have sort of been pushed to the side a bit, I think, or maybe slightly forgotten about. And the coordination that the figure of Corbyn brought to the left around not just these trade union issues, but also anti-imperialist and anti-war struggles, issues around social justice and identity politics, from a left perspective, anti-nuclear politics. These things have all become quite disparate again, I think, or more disparate, and they haven't really had the same poles to organise around.
I hope we're almost halfway through. I hope we won't talk about fucking Corbyn too much. Like, it's all very well, like, thinking about what could have been. I mean, I voted for Labour under Corbyn as well. I was a Tories out kind of person, but like, I don't know. I've heard enough cope about Corbyn to last me a lifetime. What he was doing wasn't working. It brought in a lot more people. It also put off a lot of people. And the people it put off went to the Tories, whereas the people he brought in were never going to vote for the Tories. So, I
mean, if people from the New Socialist or Tribune are listening, then yeah, absolutely do commission writers to talk about this. I mean, and again, it's interesting you sort of talk specifically about like trans men and trans boys, because I've noticed it more as just a sort of focus on like children generally, and this sort of quite QAnon infused like obsession with like grooming and paedophilia. And that's how prejudice works, right? You just find the worst things you can say about a community.
Yeah, but why are they saying that we're groomers when we're trying to trans kids, and people like Chris Tyson seem to keep popping up? It doesn't come out from nowhere, and it does a disservice to just write it off as like, oh, well, it's this conspiracy theory making us out to be the worst thing they can. It's also not baseless, and I think we should be grappling with that.
And you just keep saying it, and if it's pointed out to you that these things aren't true or they aren't accurate, you maybe find like straw man examples. You find maybe even like one or two examples that you feel kind of prove your point about the community as a whole, and you just keep like plugging at them in the media and in lobbying and political lawmaking.
Well, the problem is even people like me are doing this shit now because the community sucks. Like, I don't know. I don't think we're going to agree. She hasn't really quite got to any big points yet. I hope she will.
And, a lot of people, I think, do just quite understandably feel completely ground down by it, because these people are just completely relentless. I mean, I really am, endlessly sort of astonished at the energy for that people who've formerly written popular like anti-religious sitcoms, for example, managed to find to keep plugging away at this, despite it, obviously having a very deleterious effect on their life as a whole. And I think a lot of people at this point are kind of understandably just feeling, well, I just don't have the heart to match these people's, just burning, relentless hatred. And that's a problem as well.
Is it always hatred? I don't know. We're definitely framing things a certain way. That's just a trans thing, I guess. I don't know. I try not to myself, but I seem to be at a lonely table for one doing that. So
well, I don't really know how you deal with that, because the reason why these people are able to succeed is because they've got the mainstream media and explicitly the Conservatives, and I think implicitly the Labour leadership at this point, on their side. So we're up against an awful lot, and I think a lot more than we were like 10 years ago. So I don't know what the answer is here. I mean, I would love to have a good answer to that.
I can't tell if this is like pussying out a bit or genuinely just not having a great opinion of this kind of shit. I'm not sure.
And you can sort of make arguments about how teenagers have some level of self-understanding and should have like autonomy. But again, in a country that just absolutely just nakedly and openly despises children and young people and teenagers.
What does that mean? Jesus Christ! I love the child autonomy like arguments. By the way, like as if we shouldn't restrict any of children's autonomies when the legal drinking age is 18, 16 maybe if you're having a pint with food. The legal driving age is like 17. You know what I mean? Children just don't have the same autonomy as adults. And it's not a good argument. But anyway.
In particular, that's really difficult.
One of the...
I would be very irritated with that answer personally, because I don't think she said much of anything.
I just want to sort of suggest another way in which I feel like some of the left discourse, such as it is, and I acknowledge what you say about it being less coherent as I maybe make it sound, but another way in which it seems slightly behind to me, and it's easy to see how it happens this way in Britain, is that we often have represented trans people as a uniquely embattled community that have this unholy alliance of feminists and reactionaries, centrists and conservatives, conspiring against them with very few friends to defend them. I think that can seem like quite a Britain-centric view, and maybe it's helpful to sort of bring in America a little bit more here, where taken collectively, it seems to me that it's much more like a sort of culture and counterflow thing, where on the one hand you have quite obvious ways in which what seems in 2014 like in the incident that you refer to quite a lot in your work, the transgender tipping point has arrived, and it seems inevitable that transgender rights are going to follow the exact trajectory that previous kind of waves of civil rights have. Clearly there are...
I think that's a bit of a naive thing to think. I think it's naive to think that trans issues are going to follow the same path as, say, gay issues or black issues, especially when being trans isn't really that. It's not really very comparable to being gay, because being gay is just something you are. It's your sexuality. It's who you want to have sex with. Being trans is being one gender and saying that you're another. Like, the two things have nothing in common except we're both in the same acronym. And I guess you can take it further if you're an intersectional, which I firmly am not. So yeah. And then like race, I don't know. I don't even want to try and insult like black and like Asian and other people by trying to associate like trans issues with like race issues. I think that's like, should be obvious why that would be ridiculous. The thing is, being trans is just more contentious because it's easy. Like you can think that a man fucking a man is weird, but like ultimately that's just who they prefer to sleep with, and it doesn't have to have anything to do with you. Whereas like with like the trans stuff, you have to think about, well, can a man become a woman? Like, to what extent, you know? Is this something I personally respect? I don't know if I do. I think it's just more contentious in a lot of ways. and we're never going to get everyone on side. So I think it's naive to assume that it was just going to go the same way as other rights issues. And in that sense, it's not always the best idea to compare the trans rights thing to the gay rights movement and the battles for that, if that makes sense. Which I think people love to do because they want it to happen the same way. But there's a difference between thinking something because you want it to be so and thinking something because that's what's likely to happen, you know.
There are marked ways in which there's been a kind of reaction against that, all of that groomer discourse and kind of reheated homophobia that you referred to.
Yeah, reheated homophobia. I don't think it's helpful having that perspective myself.
That's been such a big part of the Republican Party's rhetoric in the last year, although intriguingly rejected, arguably, in the midterms this week. And that would seem to kind of go hand in hand with the increasing skepticism over trans healthcare, and especially youth trans healthcare. Mm-hmm. At the same time, another thing that I think I don't see much left analysis of is the way in which there is a counterflow. There is another way in which a quite different part of the elite has actually accelerated in the other direction in a way that might have come as a surprise to you. I don't know, but the extent to which Joe Biden, has associated himself, how far he personally understands what he's doing in these interactions, I don't know, but his project clearly has decided that it wants to be extremely pro-trans, even to the point of elevating slightly surprising figures. I mean, Dylan Mulvaney is not Laverne Cox. This is quite a different generation and quite a different sort of style of trans personality to have elevated in this way. At the same time, relatively elite work.
Listen, maybe if I act enough of a spastic on TikTok, then Keir Starmer will talk to me. Who knows?
Because at Penguin, Netflix, Saturday Night Live now, publicly walk out when even someone like Dave Chappelle, who we can argue about how transphobic that guy is. We're not talking about like having actual reactionaries on, just a kind of edgy comedian. So there are all kinds of ways where parts of the elite, which have no socialist kind of background and no particular sort of radical queer background, have completely kind of bought into this. I wonder if that's something that also is sort of lacking analysis. And again, it can't always be you, but I wonder if you ever feel concerned about the direction.
Listen, we're talking about lack of like leftist trans analysis. Like, we don't like engaging with other ideas. We like to write them off. Like, that's a huge part. I don't know if this channel still operates. Like, this guy, he rambles a fair amount. He doesn't seem like dumb or anything. I can tell where his ideology lies pretty easily, but I don't know. And maybe this person will start saying something a bit more. At the moment, the answers are very, I don't know. We're not saying a whole lot of anything, and usually I find if someone's trying to hold someone to task and say, hey, we don't hear from your side about this issue, usually what I expect to hear is someone kind of covering for it without really actually contributing anything, and without actually really giving much of an answer, which is what I felt the first answer was like.
That advocacy of trans people is taking, and whether that's not what you wanted, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might have been like Alice Caldwell-Kelly on Trash Future, and this is a perspective you hear occasionally in certain left spaces, and particularly kind of podcasts, which is where I think a lot of the most interesting left discussions are taking place now. And she talks about the future of trans advocacy and rights and acceptance in America being, the trans flag being added to the F-35s that are going and like bombing various like countries in the Near East.
That sounds extremely soy, but okay.
So, that is the problem with sort of liberal acceptance of identity-based movements, is the way they can be sort of co-opted, de-radicalized, and rather than, these movements becoming the basis for like a completely different way of organizing society or thinking about gender, they get quite easily co-opted into capitalism. And so in a way you can sort of see like the trans rights discourse being co-opted in the way that like gay and lesbian rights discourses were in the 90s and 2000s, I think. I mean, it was interesting with Joe Biden, and it did, at least, given the intertwining of British and American politics, the enjoyable spectacle of lots of like British sort of centrist columnists when Biden won the election, just saying, hey, stupid leftists, fascism isn't winning everywhere. Like, people like our politics, it's good, and people like it. And then
fascism really isn't this big fucking force that people treat it like. I don't know, is she gonna say anything? Like, come on, I don't care about like capitalism. Like, I don't know. This is much of nothing. I think his questions are okay, and they're kind of a bit wasted on this person, I think.
You know, the first thing Biden does is come out and say, I am an unequivocal supporter of trans rights. And then all of these columnists sort of immediately say, oh no, Biden's very disappointing. We don't like him. And you point out to them that Biden was doing all the things they hate and Trump was doing all the things they liked, and they got very upset. That was quite fun. But yeah, I mean, you know, this sort of elite, the terms of this elite acceptance. Yeah, like I said, I think that, you know, the classic, the sort of meme cartoon that you often see of you know, people in what is a sort of cartoon rendering of Afghanistan looking pleased as, you know, the bombs drop, and they're like, yeah, they say the next one's going to be dropped by a black woman or something like that. You know, gets to the crux of the problem with the terms of American democratic.
Left arguments on trans out of date. I don't know. I need to actually hear some because I'm not getting many. I don't know. Elite acceptance, meaning that there's a trans flag on a fucking bomb. Like, it's a great soundbite, but what does it even mean? You know what I mean? Like, what are you even for? I don't know. This is, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm forcing people to listen to this because it's kind of boring. But you know what? I think the guy on the left doesn't actually seem so bad.
Incorporation of liberation movements. So yeah, I mean, you know, that critique has existed for decades, and I think is as pertinent to the trans rights discourse and trans liberation discourse as anything else, really.
Trans liberation, there we go. It's not about, you know, assimilating or whatever. I don't even know what these people mean when they say that. I don't know what this person's politics are, but they don't seem to have much effect on the real world because people are always making shitty memes about trans people and fucking capitalism, and yeah, shit just carries on. I don't know. I find a lot of these people quite benign, and you know what they're saying is pertinent. I don't see it that way. Like, barely anyone likes us, and we're complaining that the elites are just going to put our flag on the bomb. I don't even want to be associated with the flag, so I hope it does get put on the bomb, and I hope it becomes fucking acceptable to burn that shit to the ground, because I would do it like right now if I had the means to. I would burn a fucking trans pride flag on stream.
I mean, I want to take a moment here to really praise Shon Faye's book, The Transgender Issue, which was the book that the discourse needed. And I think, you know, probably when that came out, 5 or 6 years after my memoir, which was sort of the last book. Well, no, actually, there's C.N. Lester and a few others. But, you know, in terms of, sort of, there's always like the book that the discourse needs. And Shon's book was that book at that point. And, you know, it could have been a very liberal book, just saying, look, you know, can't you just be a bit nicer to us? And Shon did a very good job of sort of linking trans liberation struggles and putting the emphasis on liberation rather than rights or representation, and linking that.
I'm just shocked at how people like sit there talking about trans liberation instead of rights when it's like, shit's not going well right now. We're not very well liked. I think we should maybe take things a step at a time, especially when to many people the idea of trans liberation is extremely nebulous and nonsensical. Like, most of us just want to live our lives, you know what I mean? I don't know what this fucking leftist shit is all about. I just want to live my life. I want to play my guitar. I want to sit here and stream and talk about my feelings, and I want to enjoy as much of my life as I can. I don't know what the fuck this person's talking about. Are left arguments on trans out of date? Yes, very much so. We're peddling the same Marxist bullshit that no one actually cares about. We're talking about how we all need to read all these books, and it's like, it doesn't seem to be making anyone any smarter. I don't see how this person's book learning has made them any smarter than someone like me who just looks at what's happening at the moment and thinks about it. But I don't know. It's quite possible this is just another very ideologically captured kind of person who goes along with the kind of cult that we found ourselves in. So I don't know. I can only speculate. I don't know anything about this person. Her name is Juliet Jakes, I think.
That with, you know, sex worker discourse, with, you know, anti-racism movements and with anti-austerity movements, and getting, you know, quite radical, I think, perspective on the subject.
Yes, that's what we need. Get more radical, because it's been working really well so far. Fucking hell. I don't know. Maybe I'm very anti this kind of thing because every trans radical type person I've ever met has turned out to be a sociopath. Or at the very least, just kind of a snake who doesn't give a fuck. Unless you think the same way they do, or so it seems. I don't know, but hey, I just don't see what use any of this is, honestly. Things haven't got better, so...
To a large audience. I don't know, it's like a very draining book for Sean to do, and, you know, came with a pretty huge backlash, like much more than my memoir did, I think. Partly because it was sort of tackling a lot of these arguments much more head-on than I did. And that's been a really important contribution to this issue, and I think the specific issue that you're talking about.
I don't know. Maybe if I read more books, I'd agree with everything she said, but I was pretty nonplussed with it, to be honest. But no, the interviewer seemed okay. If he got a better microphone, I'd probably think about watching him occasionally, depending on what he talked about. Just going to see what the channel's looking like. Ooh, let's go away. I was saying a year ago, so I'm guessing they don't operate anymore. 7 months ago, okay. So this is what Elon is trying to do. Matt Taibbi. I've heard of him, I don't know why. Matt Taibbi. Yeah, I know of Matt Taibbi, but I can't remember. Human rights expert destroys Keir Starmer on Gaza. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. What was it called? The Popular Show. Fair enough. Wasn't blown away, but hey, trans rights stuff. It is what it is.